And now it's Deputy Peadar Tóibín.
Just I'd like to ask Minister Brian Lenihan, Minister Brian Hayes. It's hard to tell the difference. It's hard to tell the difference these days. With regards to will the senior bondholders of Anglo-Irish Bank actually bear their burden? Just with regards to the substantive issue, the most recent bailout has put an enormous burden on this particular state. The reckless bucketing of €24 billion of Irish people's money by this government in the banking system will bring this state closer to unsustainability. It, in other words, has the capacity to actually break this state. It will deepen austerity measures that are crippling thousands of people, the weakest and the most vulnerable in society. It will also have the effect of deepening the pro-cyclical recession that is currently affecting this state. And it may indeed cost every individual worker, by the end of it, €13,000 each. This bailout is probably the most severe and important policy that has ever been implemented in this state since partition. It is of such importance to the people of Ireland that they should have their say by way of referendum. Over the next few days, we'll obviously debate some of these issues further and tease out the economic effects and the effects on the people with regards to the bailout itself. But there's another major cost inherent to this actual deal itself, and this is the price of Irish sovereignty. Now, sovereignty is about the quality of having supreme, independent authority over the country. In the Republic, this sovereignty lies with the people. In practical terms, this means having the right to fully determine the laws that affect the people. The goal of self-determination has been central to Sinn Féin since 1905, and indeed we have continued with that goal up to the present day itself, until we achieve, hopefully, full Irish independence and sovereignty on the island as a whole. But sovereignty is no woolly or vague aspiration. It is, in actual fact, a bread and butter issue affecting the material wealth of each individual. The referendum is the ultimate tool of sovereignty. It's a situation where the people themselves have a say over the future of the state. Now, this hard-won sovereignty over the years has been diluted by a number of EU referendums, such as the Lisbon Treaty. The passing of these treaties was surrounded by substantial debate, and in some cases, major controversies. In other words, there were in some cases reruns of referenda. In contrast, in this situation, in my view, we are actually at the cusp of a silent revolution, one which sees extensive transfer of macroeconomic sovereignty and decision-making to Brussels. The debt mountain created by Fianna Fáil has not only strangled this economy, but is leading to a substantial relocation of power from the Irish people to unelected bureaucrats in Europe. It is, in fact, a debt for sovereignty swap. Much of this loss of sovereignty has been obscured from the current debate because of the more immediate and pressing issues of the massive debt burden that's accumulating at the moment. But the outworkings of this debt for sovereignty swap will actually cause major difficulties in the future. In the future, this state will have to go cap in hand to the EU and ask for permission. The EU may or may not allow us permission to carry out certain economic activities. Or the EU may say, and to quote Minister Noonan's terms, that we can bring in the policy if we bring in about a counterbalancing measure. So the issue here is that some people will say that it doesn't matter if we hand over the economy, if we hand over economic tools itself, and that we can't make as bad, the EU can't make as such a big a mess of the economy as Fianna Fáil. And I can see that it's hard to imagine anybody making such a mess that's bigger than Fianna Fáil at the moment. But it's important to understand that the dynamics of the EU decision-making. The EU makes decisions for the better of the greater European economy. Ireland is only 1% of that economy, and therefore does not register with regards to decisions that are made. In the last 20 years, Ireland has been on a completely different economic cycle to the core European states. This means that monetary policy, which would have a beneficial impact on Germany, could have a devastating impact in Ireland. Low interest rates, for example, created the largest bust-boom cycle the world has actually seen in this state itself. So the reticence of people like myself with regards ceding sovereignty to Brussels is not based on an idealistic pipe dream. It's based on bread and butter side effects that such a sovereignty swap would have. It's also worth noting at this point that the so-called reform energy emanating from the EU that is driving this approach on decision-making capacity is not in itself ideologically neutral. Much of it comes from it. I'm going to conclude in this.
Could I ask you to move the adjournment of the debate?
I'm going to just conclude in this. Much of it comes from a deep-seated EU federalist aspiration itself.
Thanks.
So I appeal to the TDs, especially those within Fine Gael and Labour who went door to door not 40 days ago, convincing people that their new government would fairly share the burden of debt on senior bondholders. Now is your time. Now you're elected. Stand up for the people and the economic sovereignty and the survival of this state. Gur míle maith.